Whoa, what is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. Really excited to be doing the second one of these. We did the cornerbacks like, I don't know, 4 or 5 days ago. Today, we're going to be doing wide receivers. Just so you're aware, if you're watching the video, first round wide receivers. We're going to have separate videos on day 2, guys, at the quarterback, at the wide receiver position, rather, the cornerback position. We're going to be going over centers in our next video. If you have any ideas in terms of draft content that you guys would like us to go over, I'm always up for ideas. Just to throw out some other ideas that Grump and myself have talked about. We're going to do our own big board. We're going to have that up before the draft. Maybe like a top 100. Maybe we'll do it in the context of where we could see the Giants going. So that should be a lot of fun. We're going to talk about day 3 prospects, sleepers, but any other ideas that you guys may have, drop them in the comments below. But today we're going over some of probably the most exciting position in this year's draft for a lot of Giants fans. We're going to be going over the wide receiver spot. But Grump, what's going on, man? Thanks for coming back on.
I am happy to be here. Thanks for having me. I love talking draft stuff. I love wide receivers. I love offense. This is probably one of the most fun ones to watch. It's one of the most fun positions, I think, to dissect on film because there's so many different facets. And the way the NFL runs now, all of these different facets can be exploited or further weakened, or there's just a lot of speculation. There's a lot of imagining. And I think that's a lot of the fun in draft stuff, right?
Yeah, and I think for the Giants specifically, one thing that you really want to consider when it comes to specifically the wide receiver position is scheme fit. We saw that last year with Wan'Dale Robinson. A lot of people didn't feel that he may have been the best wide receiver on the board, but the Giants, I think, went more with a guy that they felt could fit into what they're looking to do as an offense. And I think you have to consider that as a Giants fan going into this draft, that it may not necessarily be the guy that everybody's talking about as the consensus number 1 wide receiver. If they have the option, they may go for the guy that's the better fit for their offensive scheme. And we've heard Joe Schoen talk about it this offseason. He doesn't seem like the type of guy that's going to prioritize height. He's talked about the need to create separation. So with that, you think quick speed, you think guys that are good route runners. So that is where I think if the Giants are going to elect to go wide receiver in the first round this year, that's the style of wide receiver that I think they'd be looking at.
Yeah, and I think that's key, right? Like I wonder if that's indicative more of today's NFL, of having the correct size wide receiver, the correct size tight end, and the correct running back is just too difficult. Like maybe there's just not 32 of all of those to go around. And it's more about just if I need 5 yards, I can have somebody run a whip route and win every time and catch the ball. You know what I mean? There is a reason guys like Richie James were as productive as they were, and it's scheme fit. And the smarter guy is winning now. So it makes evaluating all this stuff really, really interesting because there's several avenues that we can talk about. It's like, well, if they're looking for this is the guy, but this is the guy over here. So this is a lot of fun.
Yeah, different teams are going to be looking for different types of receivers based on the type of scheme they may run, the type of quarterback they may have. Certain quarterbacks may prefer a certain skill set in a wide receiver. So that's what makes it interesting. That's what makes it fun. But all we have to go off of with the Giants is 1 year, obviously with Dable and Kafka. And you have to think they're going to prioritize similar wide receivers to what the Bills and to what the Chiefs prioritized at their prior destinations. And that's guys that tend to get open rather quickly and run crisp routes. That's my line of thinking, at least.
That, and I would say also with deep speed.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, I think there's a reason that Tyreek Hill was acquired.
Yeah, and there's a reason that they wanted to, and there's a reason why the New York Giants went out there and they acquired Paris Campbell.
Sure,
he's got speed, and he's a
they
guy
certainly didn't take him for his health.
Yeah, and he's versatile too. He's a guy that's capable of playing both in the slot, on the outside. Same thing with Slayton. Not that he's a slot guy, but speed. They want guys that could take the top off the defense. But I think Campbell's a more interesting guy. I think he's more the style of wide receiver that they're probably going to be looking for if they're taking one early in the draft.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. And it's more about acquiring athletes and then, you know what I mean? Like, okay, so maybe this guy isn't the tallest or maybe he's not the strongest. Like he'll never win a contested catch, but if he doesn't have to, it kind of doesn't matter. And I think that the Paris Campbell style wide receiver is close to what they're looking for their outside guys for the most part with that versatility as well. Right. But I think they want their outside guys to be able to move inside and motion to the inside spot and be able to run a route from there. I don't think necessarily they want them to line up immediately at the slot, but just that ability to audible, to confuse. I think versatility is key. I think with this regime, I think the quick twitch and the deep speed don't necessarily have to be mutually exclusive.
I agree.
You don't need a guy that can stretch the field and also win right at the line of scrimmage with your whip routes and quick slants. They don't have to be the same guy, but they want both of those things, right? That makes sense?
That makes a lot of sense. And in this video, we're going to go over 5 guys that I think most people feel are going to go in the first round. Maybe the last guy we talk about is kind of more of like a tweener. Could be a first round, could be a second round, depending on how the teams evaluate him at the back end of the first round. But I could see all 5 of these guys easily going in the first round. And we're going to go over all of them. We'll talk about how they fit in what the New York Giants are looking to do. And Grump will break down what he's seen on film of each individual prospect. Before we jump into the prospects, we're also going to do some player comparisons over past wide receivers in terms of their combine performances, their height, their weight. I just want to go over this real quick and just kind of look at not just the wide receivers, but obviously the wide receivers, what we're focused on in this video, but just some of the players that the New York Giants have already brought in. They've brought in 18 guys. And when you look at this list, Jordan Addison, wide receiver. You've got Jalin Hyatt, wide receiver. Raheem Jarrett, not obviously a first-round target, wide receiver. Quentin Johnston, wide receiver. Along with Tyler Scott, wide receiver. And Tyler Scott and Jalen Wayne. So 33% of the guys on this list are wide receivers. So obviously you got to figure that's something that they're going to be considering strongly in this draft. Out of the guys that are first-round targets, you've got Addison, you've got Hyatt, and you've got Quentin Johnston. Those are 3 of the 5 guys we're going to be talking about. So the Giants have had discussions with some of the prospects we're going to be talking about here.
I think what's interesting about that list, and it's the first time I've seen that list, was like 20 minutes ago before we started recording this. What's interesting is not only are there 33% wide receivers, they're different segments of the draft, at least from my perspective. I look at Jalen Wayne, somebody I watched in the Senior Bowl, and I could see him as a day 3 guy, like an early day 3 guy. And then you have guys like Tyler Scott, Raheem Jarrett, I think are day 2 guys. And then you have your big name guys that we're going to talk about that are going to be day 1 guys on there. So I think they're looking this tells me, I mean, for as little as it actually tells us, that they are looking to make multiple attacks at the wide receiver position.
And what's interesting here for me too, and I don't know how much you want to read into this, you'll notice that they have a lot of first-round wide receiver prospects that they brought in for visits. Not so much with the cornerback spot. The only cornerback that they have that's really a projected first-round corner is Ringo, and he's kind of a fringe first-round cornerback prospect. Outside of him, I think Brents could fit our scheme, but he's more of like a third-round guy. He's tall with lanky arms out of Kansas State, 6'4", but obviously not a first-round prospect. So that's at least an interesting thing that you pick up on as you read that list. There's not any of the cornerbacks we talked about, or none of them are on that list outside of Ringo.
I do think that's interesting. Yeah. You'd think that would be something you'd really want to vet down the kind of guy too.
Yeah. I don't know how much that means, but I remember last year there was a couple of the guys on that list that we did draft. Cordell Flott, for example, he was on one of the 30 visits for us. And I remember that's the only reason why I knew who he was on draft day, if I'm being completely honest, because I remember going over the list and being like, oh, they visited with Cordell Flott. So who knows? But maybe it means nothing. Maybe it's a pattern. Maybe it means something. Maybe it doesn't.
I think we're still feeling out the pattern with Joe Schoen. I'm hesitant to draw any definitive conclusions from what he did last year versus and how we drafted. I think last year he operated with a very tight circle of guys because he didn't trust a lot of people. So, I hear you, and I think you're right. I think interviews probably do mean a lot to this regime. But I certainly think their offseason attack is wildly different. I mean, for instance, they're already set up and ready to go. Versus last year, they're hiring coaches while I'm at the Senior Bowl and Joe Schoen's at the Senior Bowl. So, I see Joe Schoen over there. He's on his phone, and I see also breaking news on my phone. So, that's not the best way to be doing your scouting. You know what I mean? So, there was a whole lot of running off the field.
Yeah, I say that all the time. Last year's offseason this is really his first real offseason as a New York Giants general manager. Now he's got
a GM.
As a GM. He's got his full scouting department in place. They've had an entire year now to scout these players together as one with Brandon Brown, with all of his scouts. So this is really the first, and I'm not saying we shouldn't judge his first
And with
draft.
his coaches.
And with his exactly. So I'm excited. I'm excited to see what they draw up and what their overall game plan is. But obviously, that's why we're doing the video. We both agree that it's a distinct possibility that we could be taking a wide receiver in the first round. It's still an obvious need. We still don't have a number one option there. And even if there's not like a legitimate number one, and when I say number one, I'm talking about like a bona fide stud. I'm talking about like a top 8, 9, 10 receiver in the league. There may not be a receiver in this draft that projects to be that, but they still need a guy probably that could be a bona fide 1A or a 2 that could replace a guy like Slayton after this year if they decide to part ways, right? So that's the way you got to look at this. Campbell's only on a 1-year deal. So if they really like one of these guys, even if they feel he projects to be like a top 20, 25 wide receiver in the league long term, still could be a guy they're incredibly interested in the first round of this year's draft.
Yeah, and the Giants sure could use a wide receiver to for DJ haters to take credit away from Daniel Jones. You know what I mean? Just somebody that's just like, well, of course, just somebody with a name and a face that strikes fear into the opponent. I'm like half kidding a little bit, but for real, I mean, when opponents line up against us, I think as of right now, when they look at our offense, they're like, well, we have to worry about that Andrew Thomas fellow, but it's really just DJ running and Saquon Barkley running and Brian Dable. It's not really.
Waller. And Darren Waller.
Well, now, yes. Yeah.
Now
you can add in Darren Waller, but we desperately need someone to strike fear into the heart of the opponent. Somebody to cause you to match up differently, to play off your game, for defenses to be like, I know we normally do this, but forget that. We got to worry about him. That's what they need badly. And it could come in a variety of different ways.
And this is the first guy we're going to talk about. Maybe it'll come in this way. Quentin Johnston, who many feel is the number one wide receiver in this year's class. He's definitely like a different type of wide receiver than anybody else we're going to talk about. Height, right? 6'4". And he didn't run a 40 at the combine. We're going to get into his combine statistics. We're going to get into his PFF metrics at TCU. But what he did do at the combine was incredibly impressive. Now, we were talking before this video, and we were trying to come up with like decent comparables. You're never going to get like identicals, but like prospects coming into the league that were similar in terms of stature, height, weight, what they perform with in terms of their physical abilities at the combine. And we came up with DK Metcalf. Now, DK Metcalf ran the 40, and his 40 time was incredible. Okay, right. This is DK Metcalf's combine numbers, right? He had a 4.33 with a 1.45 split for a guy that's 6'4", 230 pounds. Then he had a 40.5 on the vert and 11.2 on the broad jump. Interestingly enough, Quentin Johnston, same height, 6'4", not the same weight. He's about 215. So he could pack on 10, 15 pounds of muscle throughout his career. Is not coming in as developed as, you know, in terms of his muscles as Metcalf was. I feel like
Metcalf is like a statue carved out of marble.
Yeah, absolute freak. But we talked about 40.5 and 11.2. Those were the only two things that Quentin Johnston did at the combine. Surely enough, vertical 40.5, broad jump 11.2. So same height, had the same exact vertical, had the same exact broad jump. So just interesting, right? When you talk about player comparisons, not very similar, identical on both of those measurables. In terms of his stats with PFF over the course of the year, well at TCU, 14 games played, 365 pass snaps. He had 57 snaps in the slot, which is interesting. You wouldn't necessarily project him to be a guy that you're going to really run much in the slot at 6'4". 308 of his snaps were wide. He had 60 catches on 97 targets, 1,067 yards. He averaged almost 18 yards a catch and had 6 touchdowns. So a really productive year. Well, at TCU with Max Duggan this past year going into the draft. So obviously a guy we've all heard about. He's kind of been mixed in mocks. I've seen him going as high as like top 10, and I've seen him going as low as to the Giants at 25. So he's kind of floated around in a lot of mock drafts.
Yeah, and it's early for mock drafts. So like I think a lot of times you see people connecting teams to players and just making it fit. At times with really early mock drafts, and you get some wacko things that are just way off. But yeah, he's going to be a tough one to project because I don't know, because I just don't know how teams are going to view him. I think that there's a real log jam at other positions. Like we have a lot of really good corners in this draft. Like I don't think I've ever discussed so many first round corners in a draft.
at that
It's
position.
it's insane and it's weird. And the NFL always they go on runs when they do this stuff. So I don't know where to project him, and I don't think I'm like real good at that. But I know where to place him in terms of where I value his skill set, and that's day one for sure. I think he probably is going top 15. And that's me saying his skill set goes top 15. I don't, trades can happen. I don't know, whatever. I'm not even sure what the needs are for the teams in the top 15. We're Giants fans. We're worried about after 20. But as far as a receiver, he's the legit guy. He's your legit X guy. And of all the guys we're going to talk about, he's the only one that when you look at him, you know he's an outside receiver immediately, right? Yeah. He's a big dude. And I know we said he's a little lighter than DK Metcalf, but that's he's in some other stratosphere.
He's like a Greek god, in terms of the way that he's built. It's not fair.
But when we talk about the big guys and what they can do, it's the catch radius, man. And it's the one thing that is severely lacking on this team. I'm sure critics of this team would say that Daniel Jones, while accurate, is not incredibly precise. I'm sure there are people out there that say there's too many wide receivers having to jump for balls or having to reach low for balls or something like that. That should be a wash with a guy like this. He has a really good catch radius and he knows how to use it, which is like another whole thing. A lot of guys have tools. They have no idea how to use it.
Is what we were hoping Golladay would be.
Yeah, I would say so. But I think.
But better. But
I would say with more separation.
Yeah.
Than Golladay. I mean, we didn't get to see Golladay in his prime, unfortunately, when he was here. But he kind of became that big guy.
That would actually probably been a pretty good player comparison, but I don't want to mention Kenny Galladay's name.
I don't think Giants fans want to ever consider drafting a player that you're comparing to Kenny Golladay.
Just in terms of his height and style.
You're 100% right.
Yeah.
But I mean, like he does a lot of things that are good. I mean, there are tons of tall wide receivers that can run fast, but there aren't that many that are this good at just playing the wide receiver position. He's got good feet. One of the things that you look at with bigger guys is they tend to be a little bit more bumbling.
Right.
You got guys that have as few steps in their route as possible. Every single inch of their route should be calculated and finessed out. And of course, that's how an NFL receiver is. There's no wasted movement whatsoever. Everything is calculated and perfect, and your balance has to be right the whole way. This is a QB-friendly big guy, too. He'll work his way back to the ball. He's not going to just sit there and let it come to him and box out guys.
As a Giants fan, I'm going to be honest with you, I can't stand with the wide receivers that we had on our roster last year, because I said it every game when I'd be watching the game. And I'm not trying to pick on Darius Slayton. I'm glad he's back. But there were so many balls that would be thrown at Slayton. I'd be like, come back and snatch the ball.
Get it. Attack the ball.
Yeah. You see, and I remember pointing it out several times when we played Dallas. You'd see Gallup do that all the time. Like he's just a wide receiver off the top of my head. And yeah, that's what he could bring to this offense if we were to draft him.
100%. And you'll hear me talk about this as we do all these videos. Doesn't matter the position. Aggressiveness is a trait that is not confined to any position. For wide receiver, it's attacking the ball and it's attacking the corner. If you have hands on you and you wipe them off, that's an aggressive wide receiver. If you work your way back to the ball, if you pluck it out of the air, you're an aggressive wide receiver, in my opinion. That's the way I view aggression for the wide receiver position. And he's those things. I don't think anyone's going to bully him along the route. I think he's going to be able to out-physical, out-maneuver, out-manhandle whoever is trying to press him and grab him all along the route. I don't think anyone is going to jump up and grab a ball in front of him. It's going to take a very special kind of DB to go toe-to-toe with him and win. Because he's an alpha at the catch point. He has the size. He has the willingness. He'll play through contact. He'll draw the DPI. If you look at the film, his stats would be insane if you factor in the yardage gained from.
Well, I remember watching. I don't remember what game it was. It might have been I think it was the playoff game, not the national championship game. The playoff game. I think he drew like 4 pass interferences in that game, and I remember saying that's like 70 extra yards that he really had
in the NFL.
In the NFL, yeah,
college. That's an effective defensive move if you beat. But yeah, I mean, the main thing that I'm going to look for, and I think that just forget height, forget weight. I think the first thing that these coaches are going to look for is route running. If these guys are polished route runners, a lot of that stuff is kind of out the window. He's a little bit shorter. Well, I mean, he gained separation because he's such a good route runner. Um, Being 6'4", 215, pretty fast, and aggressive at the catch point, and also being a crisp, fleet-footed route runner, that's pretty rare, man. I would say this is top 15 talent. I don't think, when we were doing our player comparisons, the first thing we're like, I don't know, is he like Jamar Chase? No, I don't think Jamar Chase is a top 5 guy. He's a dog. You know what I mean? They come around once in a while.
Yeah.
But DK Metcalf, I think, is a good comparison, and I think Giants fans would love a DK Metcalf.
How about another name? I was just thinking as you were talking, similar height, similar style. Didn't work out with the Giants again, but Brandon Marshall. How about Marshall?
That? I think he was a little bit faster. Dude, Brandon Marshall. If the Giants had gotten Jay Cutler version of Brandon Marshall, it would have been a very different season. I mean, they didn't even get a healthy Brandon Marshall, so whatever. But
that's a guy. I think he was about 6'4". He was a guy that went up and snatched the ball. He had those types of instincts. So,
and he's also aggressive. I mean, he was going to say beat his corners as well as he beat his women, but it's a little mean for a guy with a mental health issue. So,
but what's your biggest weakness with Johnston if you had to be nitpicky and pick one?
So the way I do this, I don't really have anything that concerns me about him, but things I think he could improve on. I think he can get better at the release point. I think he could be. I think he is a big, tough guy, and I think that he could be a little bit more physical against jams. When you play in college and you're the guy on a school, people are like way more afraid of you than they will be at the NFL level. NFL defenses are going to jam him. They're going to frustrate him any way they know how, and he's going to have to learn how to deal with it better. I think he can add a little bit more variety to his footwork at the line of scrimmage as well. I think his moves there are pretty limited to like 1 or 2 things. That's not going to cut at the NFL level either. But those are really nitpicky kind of things.
Yeah, things that good coaching could certainly get him to improve upon.
And I would say even just being around veterans, like NFL veterans are like, dude, you got to start doing something like this, and they help each other out a lot.
Of course. Next guy we're going to talk about, really interesting guy here. Many felt he was going to be a top 5 pick at the start of the year. But, when you started to see the mock drafts coming out before the start of the college season. And, of course, he suffered an injury. He barely played this past year well at Ohio State. And then we saw the emergence of Marvin Harrison Jr., who's a discussion for another day. I think he could be the number 1 pick in next year's draft. That's how good he is. But Jackson Smith-Njigba out of Ohio State, really, really exciting prospect. Kind of a guy that you could move around. Something that we talked about that Joe Schoen may be looking for. A lot of people feel like he's best suited in the slot. A lot of people feel like he may be better suited on the outside. So he's kind of a guy, 6'1"-ish. He's got positional versatility in terms of the ways that you could use him. Really excited to get your breakdown on him in terms of what you see in him as a prospect. In terms of the player comparison for him, we came up with Stephon Diggs. And some people might say that and say, oh, that's crazy. But listen, their weight and height are identical. Smith-Njigba was 6 foot, 196. Stephon Diggs, 6 foot, 195. Very similar style of receivers, I would say. I'm not going to say they're identical, but similar styles. Smith-Njigba, well, at the combine, did not run the 40. He had a 35 on the vert, a 10.5 on the broad, and then a 3.93 on the 20-yard shuttle with a 6.57 on the 3-cone drill. Stephon Diggs was not very impressive at his combine, which is probably why it wasn't a very high draft pick. But his vert was identical, both 35. The broad, Smith-Njigba was much higher, 10.5 in comparison to 9.7. The 3-cone drill, 7.03 to 6.57. So again, Smith-Njigba was better. He had a much better combine. He just did not run the 40 time, though. Maybe that was because he was coming off the injury. But at least a similar style of receiver. Same height, same weight. You figure he projects to be that type of receiver at the NFL level. There's no point in looking at his PFF grade this past year because he didn't play. He only had 39 yards because of the injury. 2021, you're talking about historical numbers. I mean, the dude had 95 catches, almost 1,600 yards. He averaged 17 yards a catch and 9 touchdowns. Now, granted, it's Ohio State. I mean, Ohio State throws the ball all over the yard. And, they're notorious for putting up huge numbers, whether it be the quarterback or the wide receiver position. But very impressive nevertheless. And there's a reason that Smith-Njigba, even off the injury, not playing last year, is still being touted as a first-round wide receiver. And there's a reason why he was projected to be a top 5 pick before the year started. So clearly a guy that if he's there at 25, may draw interest for the New York Giants.
I 100% agree with you. I mean, this is a dude that's a smooth route runner. He's got good hands, good yak ability. He's got a really impressive body control along the sidelines as well. That's something that's like rare even at the NFL level, is just kind of being able to toe that sideline super well. Or it's like 100% of the time, if he's there, he's got it. It's interesting that he didn't run the 40. I understand, but it's kind of difficult for me to discern just how fast he is. We compared him to Stephon Diggs, who ran what, like a 4.46,
Yeah,
which is
it's good.
faster than me.
I said at the top of the video, the average time for a wide receiver, historically speaking. Now, of course, this is taking into account 7th round wide receivers. It's the whole talent pool. So this isn't specifically 1st round wide receivers, but the overall average 40 time for a wide receiver at the NFL Combine is 4.55. So all these guys are above that, which is why they're 1st round talents.
Right. And I think that a shoddy 40 time A could just be a bad day. It also can be eliminated by being a good route runner or just by being quick, so you don't have the long speed. It's okay. But with him, I do think it's interesting because it's tough to tell his speed from film. It looks above average. I wouldn't be surprised if it was a 4.46, but I think he's quicker than he is fast. And that comes into play with his versatility. That's what allows him to both play on the outside with the deep speed he has and on the inside with the quickness that he has. He can win against those shiftier guys. He's also got the height to box them out. You get your, 5'11 corners, 5'10 corners playing the slot. He'll have an advantage there. I think he can eat moving around. And I think we were talking about this a little bit beforehand. I think Brian Daboll, Mike Kafka love the idea of a guy who can play on the outside, come into motion, and then just be the slot receiver. You know what I mean? The trickery, the disguise, all of that is part of the offense. And for him to seamlessly be an equal threat on the outside as he is on the inside makes him that much more valuable. He does everything really well. I mean, he catches pretty well. I would say sometimes he has a tendency to trap the ball against his body, does not have that aggression that I like, attacking the ball out of the air, but that doesn't mean he has bad hands. He does have good hands, not a lot of drops with him. Just means that drops are more likely if you're going to try, or, pass breakups are more likely if you're going to just catch against your chest. I would say that contested catches are not his strong suit. It's certainly not something that happened at Ohio State. I mean, it's not really ever anything that happens at Ohio State. Guys are wide open and red.
Right.
But yeah, I would say like his biggest thing, other than health, right? Availability and health, is going to be that physicality. Is can he win when he can't separate? Can he still make the catches? And I think that's going to be the big unknown. His vert is not super duper great, but Stephon Diggs, would you call what he had, the Minnesota Miracle, a contested catch?
Kinda, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
But both had the same exact vert at 35 inches.
Yeah. So, I mean, basically what I was getting at is if you're impressed with Stephon Diggs' ability to climb the ladder, I think you'll be just as happy with Jackson Smith-Njigba.
So, obviously a very good prospect, but has some concerns. Obviously, I think the biggest concern by most Giant fans is the injury, especially with
right. So, I'm curious what you think. Like, does that wipe him off the board for you? Does that knock him really far down? How do you that doesn't do shit for you?
I'm not going to say it doesn't do shit, but I don't. It wouldn't knock him off the board for me. Like if I'm Joe Schoen and I project him to be a guy that fits in this offense really well, I'm not going to let one injury in college just like completely like take him off my board.
Well, no, but I mean, when I ask that, I guess what I mean is, are you going to knock him down so much that you're like 99% sure that he'll be gone by the time you reach the point where you're willing to take him?
I personally, I'd be happy if we got him at 25. I don't know if he's my number one guy. I want a center, but I don't think we're going to take a center at 25. So if it's between a corner and a wide receiver, yeah, he's probably in my 2 or 3 favorites to land where we're picking. The next guy we're going to talk about is probably a little bit above him for me personally, but I think a lot of people would side with Jackson Smith-Njigba due to probably the fact that he's taller. Maybe they feel like he projects a little bit better to be like a traditional wide receiver in the NFL. I just really like Zay Flowers, and there's a dead giveaway to who we're going to talk about next. But I'm a fan of Jackson Smith-Njigba from what I've seen. It's just the injury is concerning for me. But I do think he's a natural fit in terms of the type of wide receiver that Joe Schoen, Brian Daboll would be looking for. I mean, for God's sakes, we just compared him to Stephon Diggs. So it makes sense that that style of receiver, right?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't get any more. I mean, the guy that they didn't even draft, they had to trade for. Yeah, I would say it makes sense.
So just his style of play, I think, would make sense for the type of guy that they would covet.
Yeah,
Next
I
up,
mean,
oh, go
yeah.
ahead, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I think that Brian Dable is versatile enough where he's gonna get the guy that best fits what his quarterback needs. But I mean, there's plenty of comparisons to be made about Josh Allen and Daniel Jones in their style of play that I think it's probably a wash, right?
Yeah, and listen, at the end of the day, like Buffalo didn't build around the tight end. We clearly are. You know, we got a pass catching tight end in Darren Waller. So I feel like Brian Dable's the type of guy that he could make it work. He could make it. He's kind of like he's like a chameleon. Like he's willing to adjust his offensive philosophy based off the pieces that he has.
Yeah.
So just because they prefer to Stephon Diggs, it may just be that Stephon Diggs was the guy that was obtainable for Buffalo.
That's also true. Yeah.
And they fit their offense around that style of receiver. But I do think he is the type of style receiver that they made covet. Next up is a guy that I think, again, is the style of receiver that they would look towards, because you're talking about a guy when you watch his highlights, and I'm really curious to get your take in terms of when you watch his film. But when you watch his highlights, I mean, you want to talk about a quick, shifty receiver, a guy that has positional versatility, a guy that could play both inside and out. You're looking at him. And that's Zay Flowers, man. He's a big play threat. So many highlight plays, long touchdowns, really, really exciting prospect. He's started to move up mocks, though. I don't know if he'll be there at 25. If you would have looked like 2 or 3 weeks ago, most people had him going either right where we were picking or potentially a little bit after. But now you started to really see him start to creep up mocks, and he may not be there. In terms of the player that we compared him to, just in terms of style of play, his height, his weight, Tyler Lockett, I think that's a fair comparison. Lockett is 5'10", 182. Zay Flowers, 5'10", 170. So you're never going to get an identical, but pretty comparable. In terms of their combine stats, Zay Flowers ran a 4.42. He had a 1.53 in the 10-yard split with a 35.5 on the vert and a 10.7 on the broad. Tyler Lockett, 4.4, nearly identical. His 10-yard split was 1.55 in comparison to 1.53, so pretty close there. His vert, 35.5. Guess what? 35.5 for Zay Flowers. His broad jump, 10.1. Zay Flowers, 10.7. So pretty comparable in terms of the testing at the combine. Identical height, nearly identical weight. So very similar, I guess, style of wide receiver. And what they may project to be in the NFL. Tyler Lockett, obviously a very good wide receiver at the NFL level. In terms of what he did at the collegiate level this past year while at Boston College, 12 touchdowns. That's the big number that jumps out to you at the bottom. He had 78 catches for 1,077 yards, almost 14 yards a catch. Of course, he was used a lot in the slot due to his stature, but certainly a guy that has big playability on the outside. He's versatile, like Joe Shane has talked about. He had 166 slot snaps. Ironically, wide snaps, 337, so nearly double on outside, but he did have 166 slot snaps, so it shows you that he's capable of doing both. So that's Zay Flowers out of Boston College.
And Boston College runs a very pro-style offense also. So, like, those aren't gimmicky numbers. Those are very NFL snap numbers, like what is dictated as outside and what's slot and whatever. Look, I am working on just putting out more of my own stuff and kind of ranking these guys, and that's slated for the beginning of April. But I'll tease this right here. Zay Flowers is my number 1 ranked wide receiver in this draft class.
You got him above Johnston.
As from what I see on film and what I put together, I have him as the number 1 ranked guy.
Wow.
And, you know, I had trepidation about doing that, but this year I've decided I'm not going to second guess myself. I'm going to stick to my guns. He is my highest rated wide receiver in this. And the reason why is pretty simple. If there's 4 major categories for a wide receiver in terms of what they need to do, it would be route running, hands, after the catch, and blocking. And 3 out of those 4 categories, he is real good. He is a quick twitch, polished route runner. These are some of the notes I have. Fleet-footed, physical, and willing to fight through jams. Stop and start ability is next level. Creates separation at cut points in the route. No wasted steps. Able to run a variety of routes. Deadly in the screen game. Yeah, I don't know that there's a whole lot he's even going to learn about route running at the next level in comparison to other college players. I think it seems like he could be teaching it to college players. As far as catching goes, that's going to be of everything the lowest, but that's mostly just because he's 5'10". The catch radius is just working against him. His vert is just fine at 35 and a half inches or whatever it was, 35 and a half.
It was
You
30.
can certainly see him using his catch radius, extending, attacking the ball a little bit in the air. But I think what makes him special is after the catch, dude. After the catch, he is crazy. He gets north and south quickly. He has a really good eye for holes. He really understands how to utilize the blocking in front of him and angles to his advantage while running. He's dangerous, man. He's dangerous in the open field. And if you look at what a lot of, I guess this would be a DJ criticism that we've seen, was that like a lot of his passes didn't necessarily, the depth of target wasn't very far, and yet they resulted in whatever, because this offense prioritizes winning your one-on-one battles, right? So Darius Slayton, if Daniel Jones is getting clobbered and he throws this duck that Darius Slayton had to run all the way back for, and then takes it 60 yards, I forget which game that was.
Oh, I was at that game. That was the Texans game.
Texans game. Yeah. Oh, geez. We don't even win that game if that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
I would have been seeing red if we lost that. But yeah, I mean, this is an offense that prioritizes after the catch. I think that's 100% why they wanted Wan'Dale Robinson. I don't think they wanted Wan'Dale Robinson for his route running ability as it was day one, maybe his ceiling. They certainly didn't want him for his deep speed, definitely his quick speed. But where he really shined in college was after the catch with the ball in his hands. To me, Zay Flowers is the best wide receiver in this class, but it's a stocked class. So, I mean, it's okay if he's gone. And I've already seen some mocks where he's the first wide receiver off the board. That doesn't mean anything, but it wouldn't blow my mind if he went first. Would it blow yours?
No, it wouldn't. I think he's pretty much, I think there was a point where it seemed like he was kind of in that 5'6" range by most people, but he's definitely creeped into, I think, pretty much at least top 4 on almost everybody's board, and probably close to top 3 on almost every board. So would I be shocked? No, I think it all comes down to, like we said at the top of the video, it all comes down to team fits. And I have not really contemplated doing a mock draft lately. I'm probably going to do one next week. And that's when I'll think about it and say to myself, okay, this is the style of wide receiver this team may need. But if the Giants were picking 10, for example, they may prefer a guy like this to a guy like Johnston because of his style, that it may fit. I personally think his style does fit better than a guy like Quentin Johnston for what the New York Giants are looking to do. Would I be upset if we took Johnston? Absolutely not. I think he projects to be a really good wide receiver, but I think it comes down to what the type of player that teams are looking for. I think that goes a lot more into it than some people may realize, which is why the Raiders took Henry Ruggs, because they wanted the straight line speed guy in that draft, and everybody called him crazy. But hey, teams have different mentalities in terms of, they took him over. I think that was the same draft with Jerry Jeudy, who we're going to talk about in a second. And it was the same.
Was that a Mayock draft? I don't remember.
I can't remember, but they took him over both CeeDee Lamb and Jerry Jeudy, which people thought was nuts at the time. But the Raiders wanted a straight line speed guy, similar to a guy like Jalin Hyatt, for example, right? So I think a lot of it just comes down to what the teams are looking for at that specific position. So it wouldn't shock me if he did go first. I don't think he will. I'm probably still leaning that Johnston will, but it wouldn't shock me.
No, and look, when I say he's my top rated guy, that doesn't mean I think he's going first. You nailed it when you said it comes down to team fit. I don't really care where these guys go. I'm grading them based on what their skills are. So would I be upset if we got Quentin Johnston? Absolutely not. I have him graded as a first round pick. If we used a first round pick on him, that seems like good value. So
you said top 15.
Yeah, exactly. So when I say he's my top rated, it just means that I think he's the best. It doesn't mean, I don't know, it doesn't really mean anything. It's just my ranking.
You really like him.
Yeah, to me, he's a first round wide receiver. So for whatever reason, every other team in the league doesn't think that he's a first round receiver, and at pick 25, he's there. Yeah, I want him. But that wouldn't shock me. I'm not saying I think he's going first. Whenever we're talking about these in all videos going forward, they're just my rankings of them and where I value their talents.
Next guy we're going to talk about, I think he started at Pitt, if I'm not mistaken, ended up at USC with the best quarterback in college football. Caleb Williams going first overall next year. You could already put that on the map if that guy stays healthy. He's a beast. So he got to play with Caleb Williams this past year at USC. Interesting prospect. He's starting to trickle down a little bit on these mocks, and I think a lot of it has to do with his combine performance. wasn't the best, didn't really stand out. He's also a little bit undersized. In terms of his weight for a wide receiver, you'd like to see him, put on a little bit of muscle perhaps. So I wouldn't be shocked, even though a lot of people had Addison as a top 15 pick, say like 3 weeks ago. I wouldn't be shocked if he does fall to the Giants at 25. As a matter of fact, out of every wide receiver we talked about thus far, I would say he has the highest probability probably of being a guy that falls to the Giants at 25 on draft night. I would almost probably have it at about 50-50 right now that he will be there. In terms of the player comparison that we had for him, and again, it's not identical, but Jerry Jeudy. Both are known to be pretty good, very good route runners. Their height, their weight, at least similar. Addison is 6'1", 175. Jeudy 6'1", 193. So a little bit more of that muscle than, you'd like to see Addison weigh in at and still possess the speed that he does. His 40 time was a little bit underwhelming. A lot of people were hoping it would be closer to the 4.45 range. Nobody thought he was going to blow it out of the water. He ran a 4.49. Nothing that's like catastrophic. He had a 1.56 on the 10-yard split, 34-inch on the vert, and 10.2 on the broad. By comparison, CeeDee Lamb, 10 on the broad as compared to 10.2. Pretty close. 34, I think it was, for Addison on the vert, 35 for CeeDee. Where CeeDee really stands out because their 40s are fairly comparable, 4.49 to 4.45. But the 10-yard split for CeeDee really stands out for me in comparison to a lot of these other wide receivers.
Sorry, but you mean Jeudy, not CeeDee.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jeudy. Did I say CeeDee from the beginning? Jeudy is who I'm talking about. I'm sorry, Jeudy. I got them confused from the draft. Jerry Jeudy, my mistake. Jerry Jeudy, known for his route running. 1.48 in comparison to 1.56. So that's really, to me, the one thing when we were looking at it. Jeudy really stood out in terms of that quick burst off the line of scrimmage that Jordan Addison doesn't necessarily possess. But in terms of their style of play, they seem fairly similar. In terms of his PFF breakdown, he had an 82 overall grade. 875 yards for Addison. He had 8 touchdowns. So pretty good numbers, The year before, I mean, my God. At Pitt, I think it was. I don't think he played at USC in 2021, if I'm not mistaken. He had 1,593 yards and 17 touchdowns with 100 catches when I guess he was a bit more featured in the offense. In terms of his breakdown, in terms of where he lined up, again, you're seeing a guy that is at least capable of playing in the slot. Positional versatility. He had 253 snaps out wide. He had 77 in the slot. So you're talking about a guy that Shane has talked about. He wants guys that could do multiple things. So another interesting prospect in Jordan Addison.
Yeah, and I think his speed is going to be a point of emphasis among people with that 4.49 40. You said that's a more than respectable 40 time. That's very fast, but maybe a little bit slower than people thought. But I think one of the things is what makes him such a good route runner is he knows how to use his speed. We tend to talk about speed in a one gear. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Like you just put it in drive and go, and that's the speed for these guys. And the best receivers know how to throttle their speed up at the right moments. And that's how you get good separation. It's, you deceive your speed. This might be like 6 plays deep where you're intentionally running, it's not going to you. We're going to do a running play, whatever. But every time you're going a little bit slower than you can go. And when your number is going to be called, when to throttle it up to keep corners off balance. He's very good at that. He's also got real flashy feet at the release point, man. He's got all the moves down for the release point. Really sharp cuts, good timing on his moves. He also, this is a thing that these are extra little polished things that college receivers either have or don't have coming into the NFL. And it's head and body fakes along the route. You see the guys that struggle to get separation, they kind of run and then they turn and whatever. And they might be sudden. They might be quick. They might have good feet. But the little the head nods and the body fakes along the route, that all help. You can see it. It's corners struggle with that shit. It's really, I don't want to say it's important to have as a draft prospect. That's definitely something that is usually developed at the NFL level. But when players already have it coming out of college, boy, that's really cool. It just means to me, for the upside versus what you already have debate, I guess that's a famous thing, right? Which baseball player would you rather have? The guy with good form that can get to first base in 3 seconds, or the guy with bad form that gets there in 3 seconds? You want the guy with bad form because once you teach him good form, he'll be even faster. So that's kind of that ceiling answer. But when we talk about rookie contracts, I mean, you never want to say your first round pick is not somebody you're going to re-sign. But if he's starting to be separated by the more athletic guys at the end of his contract, you can kind of just let him go. And I don't know. I wonder if the NFL is trending towards this thing of just kind of are always keeping guys on rookie contracts for as long as possible.
Unless they're elite talents, yeah.
Well, yeah, but I mean, for the high price positions where it's just like, he's not elite, I'm not giving him elite money. We'll just draft another guy. I'm wondering if that's where we're trending. I'm not really worried about his poor combine. I think that this is you said most likely guy to be connected to the Giants at wide receiver at 25. I think that's probably true. I think Johnston, I think, Flowers, but who was before that? Smith and Jigba. I think those guys might all be gone by 25. The biggest thing has to be the 175 weight at 6'1". That's really light.
That's at least slightly concerning for me.
And I think the only comparison we have for a guy of that kind of frame is Devonta Smith. And even to this day, that's a constant talking point with him. LPG, you just did a whole live event with him. He constantly calls him chicken legs.
Yeah, he does.
And there's nothing that's a legit concern. I think that there is concern that at the NFL level, if you get, God forbid, Sean Taylor was still alive.
Oh, forget
he
it.
may not survive. So penalty or otherwise. So to me, Jordan Addison falls right on that fringe where he could potentially slip into day 2.
I agree with you.
I think the 25 spot is about right.
Yeah. I definitely think one of the other receivers we talked about could fall to 25. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'd probably put it at about 30% that one of those three would fall to 25. Addison, I'd have probably at least 50% at this point that he'll be there when we pick. Far from a sure thing, but I definitely think it's possible. And I have to do more research and see what the teams are going to, really looking for in front of us. But I definitely think he's a guy that we could potentially see on draft day land with the Giants at 25 if they like him. I don't remember if I mentioned him at the top of the video. Was he one of the 3 receivers we brought in? Yep, first name right there, Jordan Addison. So we did bring him in for a visit at the Combine along with Quentin Johnston, and the other one was the guy we're about to talk about, Jalin Hyatt out of Tennessee, which by no coincidence, I think they also talked to his quarterback. May have had something to do with more interest in Hyatt or one of the other wide receivers in Tennessee than Hooker himself, because I don't think the Giants are looking to draft a quarterback anytime at this point. Maybe in day 3, but I doubt Hendon Hooker will be available in day 3. So, I think Hyatt's another interesting prospect at least. He's probably trending more towards the second round. But I wouldn't be shocked because, you know what? Speed kills in the NFL. And if teams like a guy, based off his speed and his upside, I could certainly see a team convincing themselves that's picking towards the back end of the first round, like the Giants, like the Baltimore Ravens, that says, okay, this is a guy that could take the top off of defense. We could use speed in our offense. So I wouldn't be shocked if Hyatt goes in the first round. I think he's trending more towards a second round prospect, but an interesting guy to talk about nevertheless. In terms of a player comparison that we brought up when we were talking pre-video, and I think it's a really good comparison in terms of
we
style.
Struggled too, man. We went through like 10 guys before we landed here.
We were at Brandon Cooks, but then we were like, no, Brandon Cooks' 40 is a little too fast. Same thing with Deshaun Jackson. Because Hyatt is fast, but he's not like superpower fast. Like he's not like Tyreek Hill fast. He's not Deshaun Jackson fast. He's not that level.
Well, at least he didn't score that well at the Combine.
Yeah, at least he didn't score. Yeah, exactly. The guy that, when I think about it, I'm like, wow, yeah, his style of play is very similar, but he's a guy that can't stay on the field. And that's Will Fuller. Will Fuller has always been known as a burner. Now, his 40 time is more impressive than Hyatt as well, but their height, their weight, nearly identical. Hyatt, 6 foot 176, Fuller, 6 foot 186. This is what Hyatt did at the Combine, a 4.4, 1.5 on the 10-yard split. He had a 40 on the vert and an 11.3 on the broad. What did Fuller do? Not quite as impressive in the other elements. He was 10.6 on the broad in comparison to 11.3 and only a 33.5 on the vert, where Hyatt was a 40. So you talk about, having that ability to go up and snatch the ball, definitely favorable towards a guy like Hyatt. But the 40, Fuller was stronger at 4.32 and 1.47. So he had that quick speed. But regardless, Hyatt really impressive at 4.4. And in terms of style, it's far from identical, but the height, weight, similar. I think the style, the straight line speed of a guy like a Will Fuller and Hyatt, similar comparison. So I think it's a pretty good comparison. I can't wait to talk more about Hyatt. Let's go over the stats real quick while at Tennessee. Now, you always have to take this in consideration, especially when you're talking about college wide receivers. the numbers are skewed. Like you look at that Tennessee offense, it's much like Chip Kelly ran when he was at the collegiate level, what he brought to the Philadelphia Eagles. Well, he was at Oregon, constant fast pace, right? Very similar to what the Tennessee Volunteers ran, right? So his stats are off the charts, as you would expect. Same thing with Hendon Hooker, the quarterback. Slot snaps, interestingly enough, 371 snaps in the slot, only had 52 snaps out wide. 1267 in terms of yardage. He averaged 19 yards a catch out of the slot and had 15 touchdowns. He had 67 receptions on 89 targets. That's a really high reception percentage based off the targets. But yeah, so Hyatt really good from the stat department at a 77 overall grade. And he's a guy that possesses speed. That's obviously his main attribute.
I'm gonna open this up with I'm gonna try and be as even with this as I can, but I think you can throw those slot snaps kind of in the garbage. And the reason I say that is because I think it's part of that up-tempo Tennessee offense, and it's more about get to the line of scrimmage fast before they can even set up and have a mismatch built in with the lineup, with the alignment. And I think that's really what it was, a scheme to get him open. And the reason I think that is because first of all, he ran a very limited route tree. So, I mean, you think a slot guy's might have one of the more diverse. Yeah, exactly. And he has very little lateral quickness to him, very little shiftiness. If you look at it, it is, as you said, it's race car, straight line speed. It's forward. I mean, that's where he's going. So I don't know the NFL level. If he's going to be in the slot, I think he has a lot of work to do. I mean, at least for me, it's hard to tell because there's no film of it. He can do it.
You know what I compared him to as I'm thinking about it? Darius Slayton. Darius Slayton ran 4.39, a guy that had a very limited route tree coming in, was known for straight line speed.
Yeah.
Similar style of receiver, let's put it that way.
Yeah, definitely similar style. I think he had a little bit of a raw deal dealing with Hendon Hooker and having his own speed. You know what I mean? Like, I think Hooker had a lot of trouble getting the ball to him ahead of him. He had to slow down, at least from my film work and my notes. I have it as like underlined. He was underthrown a lot by Hendon Hooker, and that might have even slowed him down. I do think also, you know, the more we're thinking about this, the more I look at my notes while we're talking and stuff like that. I think that the 440 that he had, and we kind of expected a little bit faster from him, I think he has a game speed or a ball speed. You know what I mean? I think you can see that with Odell Beckham, where, you know, his 40 time was like whatever, but when he's got the ball in his hands, he runs like an animal. He just different mindset. It puts him into the blood's pumping. I don't know what the science is, but he's definitely running faster when he's got the ball in his hands than he did on that 40. He's probably a really difficult guy to project as a receiver. And I think it's really unlikely the Giants are going to take Jalin Hyatt. And I'm doing a bit of guesswork here, but to me, it doesn't make sense to.
I think he's too similar to receivers we already have.
He's too similar to receivers we already have. We're comparing him to a 5th round draft pick.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand Darius Slayton had drops
and he's performed better than a 5th round draft pick. Let's give Slayton some props, but
I'm saying that skill set, and it comes on draft night, is what they can do is often overlooked over what they can't do.
Yeah, I personally think, like, for me to be in love with taking like a straight line speed receiver in the 1st round, it has to be like superhuman speed. Like, it has to be like Tyreek Hill speed. It has
John
to be
Ross.
Jalen Waddle. It has to be like that. Like, it can't be like really impressive speed and very limited elsewhere. It has to be like you're like a track star. And Hyatt, well, he is very fast, is not a superhero. He's not Jalen Waddle. He's not Tyreek Hill. So for me, as a Giants fan, I would not be super comfortable taking him in the 1st round. You want to take him at 57? Different story. But at 25, I'm not in love with the pick.
Yeah, and if he's gonna contribute year one, he's gonna have to have like 4 routes that he has down pat, and it's gonna be slants, slant and goes, comebacks, and like wheel routes. He's gonna have to nail those, because I don't think he's going to have enough time to develop other stuff. And, you know, when I think about that, and we're talking about this, like, does any of this sound versatile? Does any of this sound like something that Brian Dable is going to covet? So I understand that maybe the speed might be enticing. And yeah, they also got Terrace Campbell and they got Darius Slayton, but they weren't super They weren't running to the table to re-sign Darius Slayton. They didn't even play him to start the year last year. Yeah. They didn't offer Paris Campbell some big deal.
They made him take a pay cut just playing the team this year.
That's what I mean. So, like, while they have those guys, it's not like they invested super heavily in those guys.
Right.
So are they going to double down on that with a first-round draft pick, second-round draft pick? I don't even think they're going to take him day 2, and I do think he's a day 2 guy.
Yeah. I think he's probably trending towards an early to mid day 2 guy. I don't think he'll be.
I think he's a round 2 guy, but where I grade him, where I would take him for this offense would be round 3 highest. I just don't think it fits. That's really it. I got nothing. I don't know the guy.
I agree with you. When you look at him, when you think about him, you don't think a guy that's, well, he is impressive. I'm not saying he's not. He certainly could be a very productive receiver at the NFL. He doesn't come across as a guy to me that fits what we're looking to do. A lot of these other guys do. I think the three guys in the middle, really, even though I really do like Quentin Johnston. If they take him, I'll be very happy. But I think the 3 guys in the middle actually they at least sound like and look like the types of wide receivers that Joe Schoen has expressed that he would like to bring into this football team. And that being Njigba, that being Jordan Addison, and that being Zay Flowers. I think those guys are the most versatile. They're guys that are, very capable route runners, guys that you could move both on the inside and out. And yeah, I think they're just the most polished prospects in this draft. So if I had to guess on draft night, if they're available, one of those 3 guys, if we elect to go wide receiver, one of those 3 guys would be a New York Giant. I don't think it would be Hyatt. And I wouldn't be shocked if they took any of those 3 guys over Quentin Johnston if both were available based off of fit for this offense. But that's just what I think.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if we said that while recording or beforehand. But yeah, same thing. If Quentin Johnston and Zay Flowers are available at 25, or Jackson Smith-Njigba or Jordan Addison, if any of those guys are available at the same time Quentin Johnston is at 25, it would not blow me away to see them go away from Quentin Johnston and take one of the other guys there. It wouldn't. And it's, I don't know. I just don't know that DK Metcalf, Des Bryant kind of guy is just so important to this front office. I think they just covet other skill sets. So yeah, it wouldn't blow me away, but I would be thrilled with 4 out of 5 of those guys. Thrilled.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, like if they took Jalin Hyatt, I would be trusting that they're going to do something interesting with him, but I would be trepidatious about it. I don't know how great I feel about it.
I agree. I wouldn't be ecstatic, but at the same time, I'd have to trust the GM and the coach to see something in him that they feel like they can morph into what they're looking to do.
Right.
But I'm excited, man. I'm excited for the draft. I'm excited to continue these videos. Our next video we'll try to do later this week when we're both free. Want to do centers because obviously right now, Grump, like you look at the centers for this, we don't have one.
We don't have any. Look at what centers, dude. Shane Lemieux and Ben Bredesen.
Yeah, like we don't have one. So I certainly think that could be a position that if we don't go in the first, certainly could go in the second. And I think I'd be surprised if we don't take a center by the end of day 2, whether it be in the second round or the third. So we'll go over all the center prospects, probably 5 or 6 of them that we could see going in that range. And we'll talk about where we think they may go in the draft, how they would fit the style of blocking that the New York Giants may have. So I'm excited. I'm excited to jump into the center prospects because I'm an offensive line guy. And I think the New York Giants need to continue to improve that. And I certainly think we're going center at some point in this draft. So we'll see. But Grump, man, and by the way, like I said at the top of the video, anybody that watched this point, you guys are the best. Again, almost an hour long. Thank you guys for all the support. Any ideas you guys may have for a future draft video? We plan on doing these hopefully like twice a week when we can fit it in our schedule as the draft is getting closer. Want to try to get like 7 or 8 quality videos out for you guys regarding the draft. Appreciate you guys for watching. And Grump, man, thanks again for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I'll be here every time you need me.
All right, guys. Have a good night. Be good. Good night. You might be watching this in the morning for all I know. Have a good night, guys.